Hi, ladies. I'm Sandra Stanley. Welcome to part 4 of Comparison Trap. This is my friend Chris's farmhouse. It's beautiful and newly renovated. You walk in the doors and you just breathe in peace. Chris has 7 children, but you would never know it. This house is so clean. It smells great, and it's full of the sounds of family and laughter. And it's so organized. I mean, look at that pantry. I love this place. This is my land of Southern living real simple it's organized and this island and these amazing lantern light fixtures. I wish I had cool lanterns over my kitchen island. But one thing I've learned, and it should be really clear by now, is that there is no win in comparison. None of us want to hang out in the land of but sometimes it just happens. We know it robs us of joy, it exhausts us, and it ultimately hurts relationships. So if we're not going to compare, what are we supposed to do when we find ourselves back here in the land of What do we say to that friend who renovates her house and we really don't want to go over there because we know it'll be 10 more years before we can renovate ours? How do we respond when a girlfriend starts rattling off her child's latest list of accomplishments? Do we immediately start questioning our own parenting, or worse, start comparing our kids? What do we do with that feeling that we have when a roommate or friend gets engaged and we're asked to be in yet another wedding that isn't our own? The answer comes down to 2 words: leverage and celebrate. Today, Andy's going to shine a light on the way forward, even when the circumstances tempt us to compare.
Celebrate. Why is it so hard to celebrate other people's successes? I mean, this should be the easiest thing in the world. And what's strange is sometimes the closer we are to someone, especially if we're related to them, the more difficult it is to celebrate. But I'll tell you who I think had the most difficult time of all growing up and celebrating. It was one of my favorite characters in the New Testament, and that is James. Imagine being Jesus' little brother, right? Hey, don't send James to the well, send Jesus to the well. You remember that little wedding trick? Jesus, we're having fish tonight, make it white. James, why don't you cook, but you don't need to go to the market because Jesus cooked last night and there are plenty of leftovers, 12 baskets full, I mean, imagine growing up as Jesus' little brother. If anybody understood the tension and if anybody understood the chaos that ensues when we just allow ourselves to fall into the comparison trap, it's James. Interestingly enough, if you're struggling with the Bible, maybe you're not a Christian, James is actually one of our strongest arguments for the deity of Christ. I mean, think about it. What would it take for your little brother, or what would it take for your older brother to convince you that he was the Son of God? And yet later on in the book of Acts, James surfaces as one of the leaders in the local church that James actually worshiped his older brother and recognized him as the Son of God. But imagine those growing up years, how difficult it would have been. His older brother really was perfect. His parents didn't just think he was perfect. He was actually perfect. And yet James gives us makes one of the most insightful observations about envy and about this whole comparison thing of anyone in the scripture. James actually gives us an insight into envy and jealousy that we find nowhere else in the scripture. Here's what he says. Look at this. For where you have envy and selfish ambition, and there's our word, envy. You know what envy is? Envy is simply those negative feelings over other people's achievements. Isn't that ugly? To feel bad when someone succeeds and to feel good when they fail. For where you have envy and selfish ambition, look at this, there you find disorder and every evil practice. You know what this means? It means that when we fall into the comparison trap, when we find ourselves just going there, that ultimately, eventually, wherever we envy, and that means in whatever relationship we become envious, in whatever relationship we find ourselves becoming jealous, right there, he says, right there in that relationship, in that place, in the workplace, at home, wherever it might be, right there, you will eventually find disorder in every single evil practice. That somehow jealousy and envy is the root of all kinds of sin. There are lots of different dots that we never connect that James would say, if you pay attention, they all connect back to your inability to break out of the comparison trap. So that brings us to this question as we come toward the end of our time together. If there's no win in comparison, then where's the win? Now, in the parable that we looked at in session 3, Jesus gave us a big clue. God has entrusted each of us with something. God has entrusted each of us with some things. And so the way forward is to go back to that parable and look carefully, and this is the way forward as we think about taking the next step and perhaps the most significant step of breaking out of the comparison trap. Here's the question that you should wrestle to the ground. Here's the question, as Sandra mentioned earlier, here's one of those questions we all need to keep front and center. Here it is. What are you planning to do with what God has entrusted to you? What are you planning to do with what God has entrusted to you? Now let's do something really awkward, and I'm not gonna pull back this time. I want you to actually turn to someone, and I want you to ask them this question out loud. Ready? Here we go. What are you planning to do, awkward, with what God has entrusted to you? Absolutely, that's it. What are you planning to do with what God has entrusted to you? So let me ask you, what are you planning to do with the things, with the relationship, with the network, with the influence? What are you planning to do with what God has entrusted to you? Now, to illustrate that, I want to draw your attention to my bookshelf over here. For the sake of illustration, you are a bookshelf. This is you. You've been decorated with a unique combination of items. You have a unique family, to which some of you would say, you can say that again. I have a unique family. No other family is exactly like yours. You know that. You have a very specific and unique idea of what you want your future to look like, either your family's future to look like, your profession, your career. You have some sort of vision. You have some sort of picture of a preferred future. That's what a vision is. It's a picture. It's a mental image of a preferred future. You have a certain amount of time, and none of us know how much time we have. You have a certain level of education, maybe more than you ever anticipated, maybe less than you wanted, but you have a level of education. This represents your story. Every single one of us has a story. Your story is a combination of the things that you have control over. Your story is a combination of things you had control over, things you have no control over, your family of origin, decisions you made, decisions that were made about you. You have a unique network of friends that the people that you're closest to, no one else has the very same network of friends or influence that you do. You have a certain look. No one looks exactly like you do. Your kids are close, right? Just like you were close to your mom, but no one looks exactly like you. You have a certain amount of wealth. You have certain gifts and talents. There are things that you can do that people find are envious. There are things that you can do that you only do them that way. So for many of you, you work, you have a profession, you have a career, you have a professional background, and then you have a certain measure of health. Some of you are very healthy. Some of you are not so healthy. Some of you are weeks away from finding out that you're not as healthy as you thought you were. But this last category is this thing that you may not be sure exactly what to name this, but this is the thing that is just true about you. In some ways, it's the culmination of everything else that comes together that makes you uniquely you. And the point is simply this: nobody's bookshelf looks exactly like yours. No one's. You are unique. Now, here's what you do, and here's what I do. And this is why comparison is such a trap. You look at someone else's family and you say, wow, I wish my family was more like them. Then you look at someone else entirely and you say, I wish my finances was more like theirs. Then you look at someone else and you say, I wish I had their education. Then you look at someone else again and you say, I wish I had some sort of professional background. I wish I had a career I could fall back on. And then you look at someone else entirely different and you say, and I wish I had their network of friends. So essentially, we all tend to do what Sandra talked about earlier when we look at everybody else's highlight reels, put them all together into some fictitious, fabricated, unreal bookcase, and then compare our bookcase to a bookcase that doesn't even exist. Chances are you have never envied all of these categories in one single person, have you? You pick and you choose, we pick and we choose, we pick and we choose, and we create in our minds this perfect person with the perfect network of friends, perfect family, everything's perfect, and we compare ourselves. But the truth is, that person doesn't exist. And the truth is, you'll never be that person. And the good news is, you aren't even intended to be that person. You are unique. You are unique. And the thing about comparison that you should never ever lose sight of is simply this, that comparison actually diminishes your uniqueness and your unique potential. Comparison actually diminishes your uniqueness. When you begin to compare an element of your life to an element of someone else's life, and then pick and choose from a lot of different people, every time you do that, every time I do that, I diminish my uniqueness. You diminish your uniqueness and you diminish your unique potential. What's on your shelf, what's on your bookshelf is not as important as what you do with what's on your bookshelf. What's on your bookshelf is not near as important as what you do with what has been given to you. What you have is less important than what you do with what you have. Besides, as we saw in the parable of the unjust steward, none of us are going to give an account for what the person next to us did with their bookshelf. You only give an account, and I only give an account for what I did with mine. And here's the thing. Focusing on someone else's gifts, talents, and opportunities, focusing on someone else's gifts, talents, and opportunities will eventually cause you to miss the unique opportunities your bookshelf provides for you. So with that in mind, I want to give you one last piece of advice. As you think about takeaways from this series, I think this is the thing above all things that propels us forward. I think this is the thing that if we will just go there mentally and go there in our heart, when we begin to drift toward comparison, this is the way out, and this potentially is the way to stay out of the comparison trap. And it goes to those two words that Sandra mentioned when she introduced this session. It's celebrate what God has given others and leverage what God has given you. It's celebrate what God has given others, and it's leverage what God has given you. And here's the thing that's so important about these two statements. You must be, and I must be, intentional every single time, because my heart and my emotion goes in the opposite direction. But you can begin choosing. You can establish a brand new habit. You can begin choosing to celebrate what God has given others and leverage what God has given you. And besides, think about this. Your favorite stories, whether they be novels or true stories or movies, your favorite stories are not about people who were born with an enviable bookshelf, who were given all the opportunities in the world, and then they went forward with their life and did something great. Because when people with a great bookshelf do something great, it's like, well, of course, they're a five-bagger, right? Your favorite story, and my favorite stories are about people who have less than enviable bookshelves. There are people who were born into situations that were not ideal, but they turned around and they did something great anyway. And when you read their stories, and when you read their biographies, and when you meet those people, do you know what you never hear? You never hear, every day I would get up and meditate on what everyone else had. What you hear is, I did what I could with what I had. I did what I could with what I had. I recognized that I was a unique person with a unique story, with some things about me that no one would ever know but me. And instead of comparing myself to the people around me, I began to do what I could with what I had. And this is why we say that comparison is a trap, because it will keep you from recognizing. It will keep you from recognizing what God has entrusted to you. And it will keep you from accomplishing what God has planned for you. And it will keep you from experiencing, as we said in session 1, it will keep you from experiencing the peace God has promised you. So develop a new habit. Make a decision today. From now on, when those emotions start to surface, when you begin to look to the left, when you begin to look to the right, when someone begins to talk about all they've done or someone shares about what someone you love or know has done, you make a decision. I do two things for the rest of my life. I celebrate what God has given others, and I'll leverage what God has given me. I'm going to celebrate what God has given others, and I'll spend the rest of my life leveraging what God has given me.
Before we make that decision to celebrate and leverage, let's think for just a minute about what that could look like. Celebrating what God has given others should be done out loud and on purpose. So when your colleague gets a promotion, write a note of congratulations. When your friend loses that last 5 pounds, tell her she looks incredible. When your roommate gets engaged, buy her first bridal magazine. Choosing to celebrate others out loud and on purpose has an amazing power to free us from the comparison trap. Celebrating others brings us into their joy, and it forces us to remember that God equips each of us uniquely. So how has God uniquely gifted you? Maybe you're a great listener or a really good encourager. Maybe it's a specific skill or talent. Or maybe your story can be leveraged to impact others. How can you put your unique skills to good use? Be inspired by others and be motivated by them, but at the end of the day, live your story. Ultimately, there's no win in comparison, but extraordinary satisfaction, waking up every single day in the center of God's will for your life, being exactly where He wants you to be and doing exactly what He has called you to do. Ladies, if every day we chose to celebrate and leverage, can you imagine what this could look like in your family? Moms, imagine what your relationship with your kids might look like if you took all that unnecessary pressure off of them. Wives, can you imagine how much better your marriage might be if your husband could rest in the fact that you're not trying to make him into somebody he's not? For those of you who are single, can you imagine how much more peace you'd have if you took your eyes off of those around you and directed your gaze towards your Heavenly Father, whose timing is perfect and whose plans for you are rich and rewarding? So, let's get out of the comparison trap. Let's get off the treadmill of comparison that just wears us out. Let's wake up each morning with resolve to be just who God has called us to be today. Take your cue about you from the one who made you, the one who loves you, the one who redeemed you. And if you will celebrate what God has given others and leverage what God has given you, you will avoid the comparison trap. You'll be free to live a life that brings God maximum glory and brings you maximum satisfaction. Now that's the win. There is no win in comparison.